What is happening there, J Gamer Dude here, and we are reaching that spooky season. The end of October is almost upon us, and that means it's almost time for Halloween. And how can we not have Halloween without some scary games? So I figured, let's go through like a random list that I Google up, and let's actually criticize the games and actually, go through the list that has been provided to us, and just say, okay, which of these are actually like genuinely good recommendations and which are just rubbish recommendations. So we have here from GameSpot from 2021 20 best horror games to play on Halloween 2021. Crap, I just swapped the... Yeah, here we go. Cool. So, let's go down this list and start off with the first of the 20. Alan Wake Remastered. Huh, okay. I can't really speak to this one because I personally have never played Alan Wake. But it doesn't seem like it would be that scary, to be honest, but we'll kind of skip over this one because I don't think there is anything else that I could... I don't think there's anything that I could genuinely add. So I can't really criticize this one for being a good or a bad choice. So in the comments below, please mention if possible. But Alien Isolation, I would absolutely say, is a banger pick. The Alien has its own AI. Pretty much it's what Mr. X is in Resident Evil 2, where like Mr. X will appear wherever. Alien Isolation, the alien is on its own set of programming that just makes it like a very unique enemy to deal with. And you might be like, you're saying a lot of really vague things. Pretty much, this guy can almost be like a psychic and actually predict exactly where you're going to be sometimes, so you are never ever safe. Maybe only like the beginning, probably hour of the game, the alien will not attack you, but then after you get introduced to the alien, every point from there on, the alien can, may, and possibly even does attack you. So you are not safe whatsoever. No matter what vent you're hiding in, that thing could be looking for you. This alien is everywhere. Its unpredictability is amazing, and it is made by Creative Assembly, who did some of the Total War games, and their helm is in the strategy space, and they did the AI for this alien so very bloody well that it's not even funny. And the 80s aesthetic to like how people saw sci-fi in the 80s is very well done. All you have to do is boot up the game and immediately you will see that sort of aesthetic being portrayed very bloody well. But anyway, excellent recommendation with Alien Isolation for sure. Now we have Amnesia Collection. Now Amnesia Collection does consist of 3 games, I suppose. The Dark Descent, A Machine for Pigs, and Justine. Now Justine apparently is an expansion to the Dark Descent, so it depends on whether or not you want to actually consider that to be separate. Because it's weird, I played through all of the Amnesia Collection in a weird order, whereas Dark Descent, Machine for Pigs, and then Justine. But with all of that said and done, you just kind of, it's a walking simulator, but there is a failure state where you can run into enemies, and if you look at those enemies long enough, you'll go insane and die. That's really about the gist of it. Also, if you stay in the darkness, you'll also go insane and die. So you have to keep an eye out for your own insanity meter. But I wouldn't necessarily say that it's particularly scary. It's just if you're afraid of the dark, then yeah, maybe, since you have to carry a light all the time with you to avoid going insane for some reason. I keep saying for some reason because I don't think it's ever justified nor explained, but I'm pretty sure it's in all of the notes that I picked up and never bothered to read. So Amnesia Collection, it's an okay pick. Could get incredibly boring. It's really more of a walking simulator. Take that for whatever it's worth. I feel like Soma is a better pick than Amnesia Collection, but even then leans more into like the like that's more like a smart man's horror game than I don't even want to call it a horror game, to be completely honest. Monsters are just chucked in there for no reason. Anyway, moving on from Amnesia Collection, which is a meh pick at best. Bloodborne. Okay. Yes, the messed up monstrosities for boss fights in Bloodborne can be kind of horror-y, but I don't consider Bloodborne to be a horror game, so this option is completely mute. Even if it has a very horror aesthetic to it, very Lovecraftian vibe, both in terms of monstrosities that you fight that look like 10 hammerhead sharks were put together in a single misformed blob of flesh. Like, it doesn't really, or even just like, the Lovecraftian vibe in the buildings and structures. Though don't get me wrong, Bloodborne is an excellent game, and I highly recommend anyone play this game. It's just, I wouldn't consider it a horror game. So, as a game recommendation generally, absolutely play thumbs up. Of course, but if it's going to be a horror game recommendation, I can't really, it's meh. It's probably worse than meh. But, keeping in mind, game, bloody excellent, please play it. Maybe not not with the intention of it being a horror game. But moving on from that. Carrion, okay. So this is the game where you play like this malformed blob of it's a side-scrolling pixel game that I don't even know what the hell to call it. Carrion is a very weird game, alright? And that's all I'm gonna say. As far as it goes, hey, it is on PlayStation. What the heck are you on about? Platform Switch. It's on PS4 for Pete's sake. Anyway, moving on from that, it's okay. It's a side-scrolling platform. Again, I feel like in terms of horror, you want it to be really scary, as in you need to be enacting the actions of the character while being in a situation that you cannot fundamentally control in any way, shape, or form. Not being the malformed monster that you are in the case of Carrion. That's why Alien Isolation is is like the best pick so far from this list. But moving on from that, Doki Doki Literature Club. Okay, we're looking at more. I'm not going to talk about this one. Again, it's better to go in knowing as little as possible. The game itself is only like a couple of hours at most. And yeah. Would I call it scary? No. Moving on. Just because I don't consider it scary doesn't mean other people wouldn't. But this leads way more into the psychological than it does more of anything else. I mean, you could probably give that a try. Again, I would recommend playing Doki Doki Literature Club, whether you like visual novels or not. Moving on from that, The Evil Within 2. A solid recommendation. I would recommend both Evil Within 1 and 2. Are they great games? No, not really. But are they great horror games? Yeah, absolutely. The monster design in The Evil Within 1 was bloody excellent. The lady with like the massive fingers and the heavy amount of inconsistency in the game's mechanics as well really mess with you even more. So it's almost unintentional bad design makes the original Evil Within an even better horror game on top of it. So yeah, that's actually a very interesting way of putting it now that I think about it, is that not only is it a fairly decent horror game because it very much leans into the whole Shinji Mikami made Resident Evil 4 and is now making The Evil Within. Like they kind of do lean into that quite a bit. Though The Evil Within 2 is more like a dad game where you have to travel through like a capricious netherworld within your daughter's noggin to save her. But with The Evil Within 1, where you've just got the main character, whose name Sebastian. Yeah, Sebastian. Going through like the sort of inconsistent mess of a game, it does actually kind of become a bit of an enjoyment, you really enjoy your time pretty much by the end of it. That enjoyment is pretty up there. Again, I'm only purely speaking for myself, I suppose, so it's a good recommendation. Again, Alien Isolation is still much better, but we can only get so many really good like recommendations as far as it goes. Moving on from that, we have Layers of Fear. Walking simulator, definitely not scary, because when you see like the babies run into walls, you're kind of like, actually, you know what? There's one thing I need to say. There's only one thing I need to say right now that would completely ruin Layers of Fear's horror aspect in every sense of the word. Is that there is no failure state, and it is impossible to die. By knowing that, I have now completely ruined Layers of Fear for you. So have fun with that. Have fun with that. This is a bad recommendation in every sense of the word because of what I've just told you now. Little Nightmares 2, okay. This is actually a great recommendation. God, I'm not going to say anything about Little Nightmares 2. You know what? Play it. It's a great game. That's all I'm going to say. It is a great recommendation for this list, and I'm not going to go into why, because I don't want to spoil anything, and I certainly don't want to ruin anything. Because when you look at the sides, okay, so it's a side-scrolling platformer, but there's so much more going on. As if Limbo and Inside are technically side-scrolling platformers as well, but they have so much more going inside those games. Little Nightmares 2 very much falls into a very similar space. Moving on from that, we have Observer System Redux, which I personally haven't played, but I have seen a little bit of gameplay of it. Bloober Team pretty much make... it's a Bloober Team game. If Layers of Fear is anything to go by, can't say that I recommend, but then again, they don't really make great games to begin with. I mean, I hope the Medium is not on this list, but we'll see when we get to it. We're just going to move on from that. Outlast is an excellent recommendation for a horror game, despite it having the worst final level of any horror game. Because while most of the game is incredibly dark and barely visible for the most part, when you're running away from John Walker and stuff like that, the final level is completely lit up like an IKEA showroom. So it's very bright, and almost blindingly so at times. The reason why I say this is an excellent recommendation is when you're playing this game for the first time. But by the time you've played the game 4 or 5 times and you're trying to speedrun the game on the hardest difficulty, the horror is completely lost. So this is very much a single playthrough game where once you understand like, okay, where everything is, the fear is kind of completely lost, and you're just like, okay, I now know what I need to do, let's just do the thing. But yeah, so if you're scared of the dark, absolutely recommend this. This is a great to almost excellent recommendation for Outlast. It's just that it lacks replayability in most parts, and this is a fairly short game. I mean, if you were to try and speedrun the game, you could probably do it in an hour and a half, given that you A, know what you're doing, and B, have like a path to run through. Moving from that, Oxenfree. No. No, this is a terrible recommendation. Oxenfree by no means has any sort of horror elements to it. It's really more of a mystery relating to the giant triangle in the sky, but also the way in which radio frequencies work, and is more of like this sort of story between teenagers going to an island just because to party it up and things like that, and then just things happen to go awry, and it happens to involve radio frequencies and a triangle in the sky. There is a lot of good to be had with the story and things like that, but I can't recommend it as like a horror game for Halloween. Let's put it that way. Next we have is Prey. I haven't played Prey, so I can't really speak to that, so we'll skip that one. Resident Evil 2 Remake. A bloody excellent recommendation. Bloody excellent. Alright, this is like Resident Evil 2 Remake and Alien Isolation. Very much on the same level. I cannot recommend this game enough. Again, Mr. X can't get you in save rooms, but even if you tried to save, the alien could just run up to you and skewer your insides or release alien babies from your insides. Totally up to whatever the alien wants to do, but it is what it is. Pretty much everything I said for Alien Isolation does count for Resident Evil 2, except that you have a significantly smaller inventory that you need to manage yourself, and yeah, I mean, it's just a bloody excellent recommendation. It is genuinely frightening. It can be very scary. Resident Evil 3 lacked Resident Evil 3's villain Nemesis lacked everything that Mr. X had going for it that was really, really good. So, while I can't recommend 2 Remake absolutely deserves to be here. 4 VR. Okay, I haven't played 4 VR, so I'm gonna skip that one. Hopefully, it'll be fun when I play it on PSVR 2, but till that time, we'll skip that one. But in terms of Resident Evil 4 being there, 4 Remake over original for any day of the week as a horror game. But if you're really into Resident Evil, I recommend you play both versions. Anyways, you'll have a great time regardless. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Again, another bloody excellent recommendation. But everything is lost after a first playthrough. Once you've been through the horrors one time, the second time onwards, you're not really going to feel it. So this very much falls into more Outlast territory, whereas Resident Evil 2 Remake does fall more into the higher echelon of what Alien Isolation does, because of how weirdly different, the enemies can Mr. X can act compared to like these hillbillies from well, the Baker family are a weird lot. I'm not going to deny that. But yeah, this is more a great to excellent recommendation. Varying on excellent. But yeah, again, that first playthrough really... Actually, the second half of the game also feels a little bit overlong. But again, that's kind of where Alien Isolation does fall a little bit short as well. Resident Evil Village is more of an action movie, an action game than a horror game, so this definitely falls more in the okay category of horror. Dollhouse is probably your best bet for horror, so that will probably make it a good recommendation. So you've got some good and bloody great recommendations. This would be an okay to good recommendation, I'd imagine. I'm going to talk too much into that. Returnal. I haven't played it enough to be able to put it as a horror game, but it definitely has a lot of good things going for it. But yeah, I think the difficulty is inherently going to rub you the wrong way, so I don't think that's going to do you much good. Yeah, I think the difficulty is definitely going to bring down the horror factor quite significantly. Soma, I was talking about this before. It is an okay recommendation from me. To be completely honest, I really didn't care about the story by the end. That's really about the size of it. So that's me personally, but a lot of other people will have, gone a little bit more deep with the story, enjoyed it a lot more, or something else in between. So if you are very much a walking simulator, likes to follow the nodes and follow like the sort of underlying undercurrent story at all times, Soma is an excellent recommendation in that sense as a horror game. However, it's okay at best for everyone else. So honestly, can't recommend it too much. Until Dawn is not actually that scary of a game. So it's a good to okay recommendation if it weren't for the fact that stalker, slasher films exist, which kind of ups it to like a great recommendation if you just want to see a bunch of teenagers get completely destroyed by the killer in the shadows. But ultimately, as a horror game, it's okay at best. It has a fairly decent sort of setup that you would expect. It's just that you as a player are too far from the proceedings to really feel that sense of horror in terms of what's going on to the characters, what's happening to them. Yes, that is the main element of the game itself, but you, the person, aren't feeling horror. So I feel like I should have prefaced this whole video by saying how scared you, the player, would be is how I would recommend this game. So this one is probably also okay at best in terms of like a horror game for Halloween. But as a Halloween game, it's still excellent. But then, you kind of need to then tear apart the bits and pieces to be like, what elements make it better than others? So I'm just going to say okay, only because as me, the player, did not get all that scared with this game. Okay, so we actually reached the bottom. Interesting. What do the comments look like? Ha, Fatal Frame. Pass on these. Clive Barker's Undying Visage. Yeah, that's Dead Space games, Pumpkin Jack, Dead Space 2. I mean, yeah, Dead Space 2. Dead Space, I wouldn't consider to be a horror game. It's too actiony, to be completely honest, from my perspective. As someone who plays a lot of, like Siren or Silent Hill. Like, that's kind of where I fall on it. But yeah, that's kind of what I thought. So I think the top highlights of this entire list would be Resident Evil 7 with the asterisk that you only play through it once. So Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 2 Remake is another great, recommendation. Outlast is another excellent recommendation. Decent amount of gore in Outlast as well if you really wanted to be there. Little Nightmares 2 is another great recommendation. Evil Within the original over Evil Within 2, to be completely honest with you. And what else do we have? Alien Isolation, absolutely cannot recommend it enough. So those are the ones that I would recommend from this list as a fan of horror games to play for Halloween. But let me know what you guys thought about it in the comments below. Like the video if you liked it, or if you like Halloween. I don't judge. And subscribe to the channel because I'd like my videos to go out to more people, and hopefully there's going to be more fans of Halloween that are going to be watching this video and taking in these recommendations. But with all that said and done, I do upload daily, so I'll see you guys tomorrow.